Welcome to Liney's podcast. My name is Frank, and today we have a very special guest in the show. His name is Mark Thomas. He's the general manager of Van Nuys, Maserati, and Alfa Romeo. Mark, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about your journey. Where did Mark come from, and how did you become the general manager of one of the most successful dealerships in South California?
Well, born and raised in Chicago, and very diverse background. From 6 years of banking, starting out trading Fed funds and doing FDIC reports at age 18 to 22. Then all of a sudden the story is I never got out of the A's in the job section. Opened up the Chicago Tribune, going down the letters of, all, looking for the jobs, accounting, automotive, office manager. Maybe I'll try that out. So Jaguar Volvo dealership outside of Chicago, started doing the accounting and the bookkeeping and that. And for 20 years, I did the accounting bookkeeping of different dealerships, consulting, different stores, even out to Hawaii, all over the country. Then all of a sudden I went down to Houston and then started dabbling a little bit with the Spiker hand-built car from Holland, and got involved a little more with the sales department. And then the last, whatever it's been, 16 years plus or whatever, with luxury motors. Luxury sales. And last almost 13 years now with different Maserati brands around the country, and obviously coming out to California first about 8 years ago. And then I left, went to Hawaii for about a year. Then I went back to Chicago for a year. Then I came back out here, just a little about less than 6 months ago. And glad to be back in California. Nice sunny weather, a better market to sell Maseratis compared to a few of the other places around the country. And I've always had a history of being up at the top in the country in California. So it was always good to come back and bring on that again.
So you started in automotive industry, not in sales?
No.
Okay. So what made you want to go in sales?
Started to see the opportunity, but after the other part of it was doing all the bookkeeping, signing the checks, and doing all the accounting, and seeing some of the paychecks being a lot bigger to the sales guys sometimes. And this was just in the Midwest, wasn't in California at all. And you're like, well, you think about it. And I was like, nah, I don't want to work those late hours. I'm not going to do that. Not that it was 8 to 5 that I was working, but it was, less hours than working on the weekends and everything like that. And I, toyed with the idea a little bit, got a little more involved with it down in Houston. And we did exotic cars, obviously the Spiker franchise. So with the Spiker brand, they've produced less than 300 cars worldwide. And it's a very unique hand-built car, and you get to know a lot of car collectors for the most part, because it's not necessarily a daily driver, although there's a few people, especially a guy in New York that uses as a daily driver from upstate into Manhattan. Even with the rain, the joke is, and, he puts his umbrella up and just still drives with the car. So it's not really a daily driver, but you get to know a lot of the people, and the luxury market selling is totally different than a high-volume domestic or import store. And the funny part about it is all the years that I worked in an accounting office and doing all the bookkeeping, they'd always say like, hey, Mark, what do you do? I'd say, I work at a car dealership, but I'm not a salesman. And was always my quick move was, I'm not a salesman. And I'm like, it's funny because then out of becoming a salesman and, working as a sales manager and running the operations over the last, almost 15 plus years, I've been good at it. So then you wonder sometimes, okay, what happens if I would have done it right from the get-go? But anyways, I enjoy what I was doing before, and obviously you still meet a lot of people, a lot of contacts, coast to coast as well. And it gives me a real diverse background from all the aspects within the dealership.
I didn't know that about you. I thought you started selling cars. I didn't know you were in the business office doing accounting and stuff like that.
20 years.
Oh, that is crazy. So how long were you a salesperson before you become a sales manager?
Actually, I was kind of helping sell cars on a busy Saturday, or if they needed somebody to help do the paperwork when somebody was doing the paperwork for somebody else. I was like always filling in, because obviously being a controller, you're inspecting all the paperwork. So you know all the details of what you have to do in and out on the deal, with the exception of selling product to somebody. So it never really was a salesperson per se on the most part directly. It was always kind of in a manager role, and then just naturally, selling cars in that too. Yeah.
Got it. Well, I have to say that you are very good at it. I was just looking at the numbers for anyone at home listening or watching this. I was just looking at the numbers. his dealership, with him in charge and the crew, you guys been winning compared to the rest of the dealership. You guys number one for past what, 4 months now? 5 months now?
Yep, going on 5 months now.
5 months
Yeah,
now.
year to date in the country,
Yeah.
that we've been, number one. And then prior to me coming on board, I mean, that location did maybe 2 to 3 cars a month.
Wow, that is insane. That is crazy. But again, I was looking at the numbers, and it's not like you guys are ahead by 1 or 2 cars. We're talking about 70 cars. We're talking about like a lot of, like, some of the dealers, they're like far behind you. They're not even close. I mean,
Yeah.
that's crazy. So
Yeah, the volume of the cars is, you don't really focus on that. We're not doing the high volume where you're doing, some stores do up to 1,000 cars a month, new car sales, and then with used. I mean, it's not that the location can't get to that, but it's obviously, we had a few little obstacles when I took the job because, one thing was, as the word was out, that, hey, they got a bunch of cars in inventory and we need to sell the cars off, and then it was like it went through the grapevine at Maserati and, coast to coast, they're like, hey, we know the guy, In fact, one of the guys at corporate, he came up with a little slogan. He's like, do you have too many cars in inventory? Is your inventory costing you too much money? Call Mark Thomas. He'll help sell out of your cars. And it was funny. He sent a text after I helped sell down some of the cars within the first few months of being there, and even going back just within the few months. I mean, I started mid-November. So by the time you get a few things in play, but December year to date, we were number one in the region, third in the country. December, we were obviously one in the region still. We were second in the country. And then third month, we were number one. Of course, the pressure was on. If I did 3-2, it had to be one by the time we got to February. And then, we got year to date as well at the same time, and, been holding that consistent.
that's amazing. That's fantastic. So this is what I wanted to ask you. So you took the job, you took the role as the general manager. Obviously, they were desperate. They needed you to help them out. But since you took the role, what did you do? What have you implement? What kind of strategies did you take? What do you think was the cause of your success for being the number one dealership not long after you took over?
Well, some of it is, I look at it and you have to break it down. You have to be focused on it. Having the wrong inventory is what's going to hurt you as well, right? So, and then knowing the programs. So knowing the Maserati programs all the way down to the details and stuff. And there's, dealers coast to coast, and over the years, they get to know me, call me, they copy me, but, they'll call for consulting and that. And a lot of times they'll refer to me as Mark's the Rain Man of Maserati. Like, he'll find a way, he'll figure out the way to do it. And people are like, hey, you can't sell the car like that. You're losing money. Well, no, you got to use this program, and then you do it with this one, and you can, put everything together and do this, and, kind of find the roadmap and the ways to make it happen, but it's definitely a strategic procedure that you have to do. And obviously doing it a few times, it was just like when I met you first, going to Beverly Hills, which, yes, the store in Beverly Hills should be number one in the country. And a lot of franchises are in Beverly Hills, and those franchises are number one in the country. But the Maserati location wasn't. And that was where the first place of being number one for, 6.5 years, even though I moved from Beverly Hills to Santa Monica to Newport Beach, within different ownerships, and then still bringing those stores year to date to finish the year off as the top Maserati selling dealer in the world.
Yes, yes. I mean, it's amazing. I was always wondering, like, what was the secret behind it? Like, so you come in, obviously, the programs of Maserati and also Alfa Romeo, and you come up with genius programs to how to move these cars based on selling them, like leasing them to the people, or like, is it like the way you advertise them?
It's a combination. I mean, some of it really breaks down to the individual location, right? And the biggest part with Maserati is people see it, but they think it's a lot more expensive than what it is, and there are options to it. And especially people that are driving a Mercedes, BMW, Porsche, they think that Maserati's no comparison to the price. So a lot of times it's getting it out there, getting it to people, pitching it to the right people. But the biggest part is even probably from inside, it's like a personal challenge, to, okay, I can do this. But you got to have that positive mindset from the beginning of the day to the beginning of the month, and even if you didn't hit it in 1 month, again, being up at the top, you're not going to be the top selling dealer every month. But sometimes the key is, as long as you got it year to date, you can give up a month or two, and it's all about the planning. Or if you sell off too much inventory in 1 month, which even last month took us for a little dip, but we still ended up staying number one because we sold off too many cars. And then it's a matter of also acquiring the cars. So you got to not only worry about selling them, but you got to stay and manage your inventory of what sells. Because if you don't have the right mix, you don't have enough cars coming in the pipeline that you ordered from the factory, you got to find out where you can pull the cars from. Are you pulling them back from Midwest? Are you pulling them from the port? And strategically having a selection, not only of price, but a selection of color and options in the car, because it's a matter of what the people want. I've gone in and out of dealership after dealership, and a lot of times it's like, okay, who orders the cars? Oh, he does. Like, why are all the cars fully loaded, or why are all the cars have this same option? And a lot of people that order cars for the dealerships end up ordering cars that are what they want. It's like, oh, I can build any car I want. Well, you don't own it, and somebody else has got to want it. So the key is you can build one the way you want it, but you got to remember you need to build cars or have cars to sell that other people may want.
It makes so much sense. The old saying that your inventory could put you out of business or back into business. So it definitely makes sense. But it reminded me to this one guy we used to work with many, many years ago. And this was at the Mercedes dealership. And the way they ordered cars, it was very different. Like, until a moment they decided to, we need to bring someone to actually start ordering cars for us. Because every car had red leather seats. Every car was black. And then they're like, okay, well, who's ordering all these cars with red leather seats? What happened with the black interior? What happened with the beige interior? So that makes sense. Definitely makes sense.
And even one of the times I worked for a while in Nashville, and it was exactly the same thing. It was like, hey, who would order these cars? And it was this kid that was not a kid. I say it was a kid because he was younger than me.
Yeah.
But he's the one that ordered all the cars, and he had all this sport equipment. It was all high priced, carbon fiber, this, that, whatever. Well, again, you got to know your market, because, Nashville's a little more conservative. If you got somebody that's going to buy, not that there's not a lot of money there, and this was years ago, but you got to have the selection that people want to buy, because, again, nobody comes in and wants to buy the car that's the most expensive. And you need to have the equal price point that payment, if they're leasing it, or that purchase price is within their budget. But if you don't have the cars, and more importantly, what happens a lot of times is the salesman will say, we don't have it. And then dead silence.
Yes.
Well, the key is like, well, we don't have it, but you know what? We can get it. Tell me, Frank, tell me what you would like to have. What's important to you on the options inside, outside, interior color, first, second choice, exterior color, what kind of wheels do you want, right? It's a matter of building that. Even if I just sold a car that you came in on, I'm not going to tell you that the car is sold. The first thing is okay, Frank, well, that black red car that you were coming in on, that, Maserati, let me just ask you, was that exactly the perfect fit for you? What if would a different color work better for you, interior, exterior? Or did you love that car with every option, every feature of it, and everything like that? Well, actually, good question, Mark. Actually, I would have really loved it if it was white with red interior, and if it had these wheels instead of that one. Okay, great. You know what? And then we just go a totally different tangent and never told you that the car was sold. But the most common mistake that salespeople do is tell you, we just sold it. Not, we just sold it, we'll find you another one. But more importantly, don't even tell them it's sold right off the bat. You're not lying about it. The first thing is just to avoid the question. Go into saying, is that exactly 100% what you wanted? Or if I could get you the car for around the same price, how would you build it if you were building it? Right? It just depends on how you pitch it. And then all of a sudden the customer, in a lot of cases, will go off in a tangent and say, well, that red interior, the price is really what got me, but the red interior really wasn't, it's a little too much red that I wanted. Okay, well, what's your second choice? You want Coolio interior, you want black interior, you want beige. You just go over the feature of what they want. And then sometimes it doesn't matter. Oh, yeah, well, we sold that one, but we'll get this one and we can do it. And it's not a matter of them, okay, thanks, Frank. I'll leave, right? And they just walk out. Or especially if you got them on the phone, they're just going to hang up. And that's where a lot of times those lost sales opportunities come into play. It's just without the proper training and the right way to ask or phrase questions or answers to customers.
Okay, so this makes sense what you just said, and it brings me to another question. Actually, this was something I was going to ask you a little further down. But so since we talked about salespeople and how salespeople respond to clients coming for certain cars that are sold, it brings me back to this question that I had that I wanted to ask you was, what do you guys do or what do you suggest? Because in today's market, salespeople are paid differently, and the turnover for salespeople at car dealership is high. And what do you suggest dealerships should do to hire and keep good salespeople? Because just because someone has a title next to their name on their business card says salesperson, they're not necessarily a salesperson. But what I see today is like a lot of salespeople are like, if you walk up to a dealership, like let's just say a luxury dealership as like yours, or Mercedes or Porsche, sometimes you face salespeople that are, you're not sure if they're actually selling, that you're not sure, because the first impression is everything, as they say. Right. You're not sure if there's someone from service department, is that person a porter? You're not necessarily sure. And the question is, what do you suggest a dealership, a general manager needs to do to hire the right salesperson, keep the good salesperson? Because there's a huge turnover in salespeople.
The biggest thing is to keep in mind the fact that you're inspecting what is happening in the store, because you have to reverse the role and really do your own secret shopping, whether it's emails, whether it's phone calls, have somebody else call, listen to the calls if the calls are within certain recording tracks. I mean, obviously, a lot of times people call in to anywhere and they'll say, your call may be, recorded for quality assurance, right? So the key is to actually listen to it, right? It's just like sending an email. I can't tell you how many times at different locations and even where I'm currently at, people will send an email and they don't copy themselves to, let's say, their Outlook account, or their personal email address and, blind copy them to see what it looks like when it comes back to the customer. Because a lot of times, one, you got to reread it. And honestly, that's one of the downfalls I'll do sometimes is I'm in a rush. Okay, I got to get through all these leads and then I don't go back and reread it, and it doesn't make sense what I wrote because my thoughts are 20 steps ahead, so you always want to reread it. But the other thing is look at how the format is. If for some reason your logo on it is distorted, you're not sending a professional image or impression of that email or the phone call or the conversation, or like you said, if you walk into the dealership, what is somebody going to see? Are they welcomed as soon as they walk in the door, right? Whether it's the porter or whether it's the car wash guy or the first person they see, it's all about that first impression to the dealership all the way until they get to a salesman, or it's just like the phrase like, okay, I got to go to the bathroom or, can I hit the bathroom first, right? Well, a lot of times it's like, okay, it's over there. Well, that's not a step of luxury, right? You go to a Four Seasons, you go to a high-end restaurant or whatever, not that you're going to walk into the stall with them, but it's a matter of walking them towards the
proper direction,
walking them into the direction of the bathroom and get in that vicinity rather than pointing across the showroom or pointing them across the dealership and then, oh, it's over there, right? Or go there and turn right and you'll see it, right? I mean, that's a common thing, but it's about the experience, follow me here. I'll lead you the way, right? But a lot of times going back to your question, it's about, what are we actually serving up? It's just like if you had a restaurant, right? You want to see what the presentation of the plate is, right? Besides what it tastes like, right? That's what's going to regulate your business. Well, the dealership is the same way. How is your sales staff, even in the service department, but how's the sales staff actually presenting to the customer their first impression, the numbers they talk about, or what they go over on the car? And it's all about how it's presented back, right? So a lot of times you have to look back and look at it yourself, right? And obviously you can always see it in surveys or, CSI satisfactions or different things like that. But doing the secret shopping, one of the things I did many years ago when I first started with Maserati is I traveled a lot. And every place that I would go and travel, I'd always look around on the map and see how many Maserati stores they were and or competition sometimes. And I would go in and secret shop them, right? Not only from walking into the showroom, but also walking in and getting their information, not go through the whole role and waste the salesperson's time, because you can do enough just in the brief part of it, but you get their information, you send a email to them, see how they respond, how many emails do they send, what are the responses, but it's down to the different locations. And actually the first Maserati dealership I worked at was in Cleveland, Ohio, and even May of 2014, we were number one in the country with 54 cars in Cleveland. So once I knew I could be number one for the month in Cleveland, it was always in the back of my mind wherever I went, within a month, maybe at some point in time in the right location, you could be number one year to date. But going back to that experience, I used to travel to California a ton of times, right? Sometimes 4, 5, 6 times a year, whether it was a weekend trip or whatever. And I'd always come out, visit the dealerships. So I was up in the Bay Area or I was down in Southern California more often, walk into the dealerships in Beverly Hills and see what's different about it, right? How do they handle the people? So when you bring some of that from a higher end market to Cleveland, obviously it makes it easier because that's an experience they're not used to. So that's kind of the best recommendation is, inspect what the presentation is to the customer, but do your own secret shopping, not on yourself only, but the competition or different dealers in the country. It's just like when you sell for a period of time, I would tell different people would ask, and if they had a lower brand, like even when I was in Hawaii, of course I had everything from Ferrari, Lamborghini, Maserati, Bentley, Rolls-Royce. You can have a lot of the different franchise that you work for. But if you got to the level of treated everybody, if they were at that type of a franchise, even if you were selling Toyotas or Fords or Chevys or Kia, right? If you give them that high-end experience, it's more than what they expect. But on the flip side, if you're dealing with people on the luxury side and you don't give them the service that they expect, that's what's going to make or break the sale as well.
Yes. I'm a big believer in that. It's all about the setup. It's how you set it up from the beginning to the end. And a lot of times I do see this mistake happen. People, they don't set things up properly. One of the things I say, which I'm going to ask you something else after this, it's in sales. A lot of times, like obviously I've been in sales in automotive industry for many years now, but what has always worked for me was figuring out the proper setup. When you set things up correctly, when you act like the customer deserve to be there, deserve to test drive the car, see the car, buy the car. When you act like customer can buy, they will buy. So what you just said, that made very well sense. But when dealerships hire salespeople, like if you're hiring someone, what do you look for? And also, what kind of advice do you have for salespeople out there that they want to be better at their job?
Well, the first thing is obviously presentation, right? We talk about presentation of what we talked about a few minutes ago, right? It's just like if you want to come in for a job, actually, even ironically, earlier this evening, before heading over here, one of the BDC agents came upstairs and said, hey, this gentleman walked in and he's asking about a sales position. Okay, well, you got jeans and a t-shirt on and you're walking into a luxury dealership. You're already starting off on the wrong foot. I had a guy a few months ago that came in and he's been in the car business, right? And he had a jacket on, he had a shirt, half of his shirt was tucked out, shirt wasn't the right size, right? And again, it's all about the presentation. So again, turn the tables. The key to me a lot of times is you got to turn the tables. How do you want to be treated? Or what's the impression you got, right? If you don't like the way they look when they come in the first time to go get that job for the first time. So for those that want to go out and get a job for the first time, into sales or for any job, right? The first impression is what makes the difference, right? It's just like if you're going on a date, you want to go pick somebody up. It's all about the first impression. If you don't impress them on the first time, chances are you might not get them the next time around, right? Because you already made that wrong impression. So somebody walks in, Or the same thing if you call them up on the phone, and it's just how's the jargon, right? Because if you're going to call on the phone and sell a car, or even just discuss a car or discuss the dealership, how do they sound? That's the way I evaluate it, right? And that's where, again, the best recommendation I can give is, before you go into the job, before you commit to that's the location I want to go look for a job, make yourself president. Am I coming in to win? Just like when you sell cars each day, you got to come in to win, right? Whether you got fights at home, you got something else on your mind, whether it's money, whether it's relationship, whatever it is, you come into work because, the key that I say a lot of times is, the customer comes in, they're on the edge. They're like right on the edge, right? And you're either going to keep them on the ledge or you're going to knock them off the ledge. Because most of the time, especially in the luxury market, they want the car. They don't need the car. They don't need to use it if it's on the luxury side, which, most of my sales experience has been at that. They don't need it to get to work on tomorrow, right? Versus on some dealerships, it's a whole different facet that you have to follow up with them, right? And the relationship is the biggest key in the luxury market. It's all about where you can find that common ground or that basics, right? Even if it's down to, the area code of the phone is 808. Okay, I know the guy's from Hawaii. It's 312. I know he's from Chicago. Hey, I'm originally from Chicago, right? The faster you can get off the car conversation and get on the common part of where you can find that common bond, that's where the defenses are down. I don't like dealing with a car salesman, right? So get on the common bond. Again, they're coming in, they're on the ledge. They know they want to buy that car. They're just looking for you to validate what their thoughts are and what their impression is of the car. You're either going to convince them to do it or you're going to make them hesitate, hang on the ledge, or you're going to knock them off the ledge and say, you know what, I'll just move on to something else.
It makes sense. So what you're suggesting is a salesperson needs to be trained how to handle a client, how to greet a client, how to help a client, how to build value, and everything else, right? As you said, build some sort of a relationship with the client. So you don't hire, or per se, you would not suggest anybody go get a job at a high-end store at Maserati or anything like it if you've never sold cars in the past.
Not necessarily if you haven't sold cars, because again, it's about the relationship and how you're taking care of that luxury buyer, right? Somebody that's working at a hotel that works at a Four Seasons, right? Or a Waldorf Astoria or a high-end restaurant even, right? Something in the luxury market, they're used to dealing with those type of people. So the key is having them be able to deal with luxury clients, right? And a lot of times you don't have to sell cars to be at that point. Again, I was doing accounting, in fact, many years I was a firefighter and I was 7 years full-time, 24 on, 48 off, doing accounting work back in the bunk space, waiting for the next call to come in, right? This was way before selling cars, and again, I had no luxury experience before that other than a little bit within the years starting in Houston and dealing with, Spiker. But you can be, and I've seen a lot of successful people, that had high-end, luxury shopping experience with clients, or they have luxury clients. Even in LA market, you could have high-end realtors, right? That they're dealing with real estate and high-end buyers. And as long as you can get along with them, you can sell them anything. It doesn't matter whether it's cars, it's jewelry, it's housing, right? Or apartments, leasing. So with that luxury experience, but going back again, it's how you want to be treated, whether you have the money or not, right? You want to get in as a salesman, you want to make money, you want to be up at the top of your game, right? You might not have it before you start the job. But the key is whether you have it or don't, if you had it, how would you want to be treated, right? If you walked into a Rolls-Royce dealer or a Maserati dealership, right, how do you expect to be treated? So the key is taking care of them the way they do. Another point is if you're going on a job interview and you want to know where the difference is, right, before you go on that interview, if it's a luxury dealership, go stop in somewhere, right? If you go into the Rolex shop, see how they treat you, right? If there's a Four Seasons around you, just walk through. How does everybody go through? They go in, they give you a smile, they say welcome. If you happen to be there before, they use your name again, and they'll say, hey, Frank, how you doing again? How long it's been? It's been over a year. You haven't been here, right? It's always like, this secret service thing that Four Seasons hotels do if you get to know them. Not that I've gone to Four Seasons on a regular basis, but I use it as an example because if I'm in a market where they have it, it's just a matter of walking through the lobby, walk through the restaurant, see how things are different, go into a high-end shop, even like a Coach or a Fendi or some of the other high-end places, see how they act. What are their mannerisms? How do they do? Because they're all been trained. They're trained to deal with luxury buyers. So just stop into a few places and see how it's different than if I go to Target or I go to Walmart, right? You're going to be treated differently when you go into a Target or Walmart than you are going somewhere else. It's just like, whether you're going to Chick-fil-A, you're going to McDonald's, you're going to, a different fast food. Every place treats somebody on average a little bit different. So if you're going for a luxury market, that's another example of getting an experience going into a luxury jewelry store or a luxury clothing store, in a hotel, and get to know how they, how are they, because they're trained and they spend a lot of money.
I totally agree, and I think training is very important. But I think a lot of dealerships out there, if they're going to hire someone, but again, this is my opinion, and I'll give you an example why I think this. It's because if they train someone properly, they let them know, because we're talking about someone that has never sold cars before or never sold anything before. If you train them, you properly train them, they have an idea of what to do. Besides the fact they need to, make relationships or be nice to people and stuff like that. But and I say this because I got a job at Ford, and the gentleman hired me. This is, I don't even know how many years back this was, but this was a dealership that they sold an average of, I want to say 400 or 500 cars a month. I mean, this was a large Ford dealership. And I've never seen anything like this because I started from used cars. I didn't start selling new cars. When I got hired, I was not allowed to talk to customers unless I go through their training, which was like 3-4 days. You had to show up early in the morning. There was a class, and everybody talked about sales, and there were like people asked questions. There was trainers, and then we also watched Grant Cardone videos at the time. So I think one of the reasons that dealership was so successful because they hired people that they might have not been the best salespeople in the world, but if they saw potential in them, they will hire him and they will train him. I got a lot out of that job. The training part was absolutely amazing. I got introduced to Grant Cardone, and I fell in love with Grant Cardone. Some people like him, some people don't like the guy, but at that time, I was just studying this guy and everything that he was talking about, what to say, what not to say. I just found it very fascinating, just the way the guy was teaching sales. Because I came from used cars and I thought I knew something, but then I started listening to this guy and he was just like, telling you what to do, what not to do, which a lot of it is kind of like, I feel like it's probably not the proper way to do it now these days. Back in the days, I'm talking about 20 years ago. I don't even know how many years ago, but so I'm a big believer in the training part.
Yep. Funny you say that because actually when I was in Cleveland and I joined that auto group, they were big on that as well. And they had Grant Cardone. They had the Grant Cardone training. In fact, he came out and they flew him out a couple times during the 5.5 years I was out there. Came in and obviously signed your 10X book and signed a couple of the other books that he did. And he came out and they hired him to do it in person, let alone you got the video and they have the whole training videos. They signed up every employee. You could take all the classes. And, even before moving back out to California, the dealership I was working at in Chicago had, another person that's in that category, Andy Elliott, that's big for it. And again, it's just a matter of, and again, I'm with you. I don't agree 100% with every pitch line that they do, right? Because depending on the market, I mean, hey, if somebody used that on me, I'd be like, hey, I'm out of here, right? But it's just a matter of seeing that it's possible and what can be done and that positive mindset, right? It's a matter of, again, having that positive mindset. And that's the biggest thing that those guys do, right? No negativity, whether it's signs on the wall, no negativity or whatever, as a reminder that you have, those are all things that, like you said, it's something to inspire you. And you do need to have that training structure. I didn't touch base on that, but you bring up a good point because having that, even in the past. It's just a matter of, okay, how are you going to do this, right? Always do it better than somebody else, right? Grant Cardone's big thing is do it 10 times better than how you would want it to be done, right? Or do it 10 times better than what you think it should be done, right? And if you do it 10 times more, okay, even if you can't get the 10, right? Do it 2, 3, 4, 5 times more. It's still a better impression than what the customer is probably going to expect, right? But having that big number and having that in the back of your mind, you bring up a good point that is a big part of training. That when I saw that getting into sales, that did make a difference, right? You get up in the morning, okay, let me knock out a few classes, not just because I was told you got to do 2 classes here. Everybody, managers got to set the example for the sales staff, right? They got to do 2 a day, then you got to do at least 2, if not 4 a day, right? But you get into it, right? It's just like listening to driving in a car. You get into a habit, especially if you're stuck in traffic or doing things, it's listening to, training videos, how to sell, motivational things, positive mindset, and the other thing that ties in at different times, and you'll hear some of these guys talk about it, it's always about shoot for something, right? Write down your goals, have them, always shoot for it, right? Because if you don't have that picture, okay, of the mountains and the snow-capped mountains, right? Even for a period of time I worked in Denver, right? I always in the back of my mind thought, okay, I'm going to go work in Hawaii at some point, or actually going back to Cleveland. I'd go into the dealerships in California. I'm going to go work in California at some point in time. Now it's second nature. I mean, I went and worked in Hawaii. It's all about a mindset. Not that you have to commit to it every day. It's just keeping it out there, and naturally, for whatever reason, it happens. But if you don't set those goals, you don't set those things in the back of your mind. I had this old postcard for a while, and my son actually ended up, finding it at some point in time, and I could still remember him. I don't remember how old he was. And he said, hey, Dad, what's that? And it was like, I forgot the phrase that was on it, but it was a picture of a lake with snow-capped mountains, and it was something motivational, like, have this place like your go-to place for if things get chaotic or whatever. And it's funny when I go back and visit him at different times, even the last time I went back to visit, he's got it up in his mirror in the bathroom, right? And again, it's just about having something to remind you about, where the goal is. And naturally it happens, right? If you're forcing it to happen, it won't happen.
Yeah.
It's just, you got to put that out in the backdrop. And it's amazing how sometimes that stuff, I never believed it. And then all of a sudden when I stop and look back and I was like, okay, there's a few times I thought about this, thought about that. And and it all kind of works out.
I'm a big believer in law of attraction, and I think you're talking about law of attraction here, and not always happens on our timeline. Sometimes it might take a little longer or sooner. And going back to, you said writing down what they want to do, like I said, their own goals, I think is important because it will motivate them to do things differently. Because this is what I say. If I'm going to go get a job somewhere, if I'm going to go get a job and look at the job as just a job, let's be honest, the job sucks. Yeah. But if the job becomes a tool to help me to reach my goals, now we're talking different. Right. And one of the reasons that I became extremely involved in learning and training and do all this thing on my own, I wasn't being told by someone. It was because I want to be better at what I did. And I'm an entrepreneur, and I feel like a lot of people say, oh, I'm an entrepreneur because I want to have a business. But I think I was an entrepreneur before I even knew what a business was. I remember I was selling anything that I possibly could to people, try to learn how to sell. I was going to have a business. And little things led to another. And when I got into an automotive industry, and I think it was the second podcast episode, I talked about how I got in the automotive industry. It's a very funny story. If no one has heard this, you need to go and listen to the second podcast episode. And it's insane. You're not going to believe it. I went to get a car. I'm not going to say the whole story, but this is just a little bit of it. I went to get a car. And the car that I went for a test drive, I was waiting for it. And the guy was selling it to me, his young wife, I think she was like in early 20s. And he's like, I don't know, maybe 50, 60, something like that. And when she showed up, she gave the car, went for a test drive, came back, found her wedding ring in the car. And 3 months later, they got divorced. But I'm not going to tell the whole story. If anybody wants to listen to it, go back to listen to it. But yeah, training and self growth. That I think that's the word I was looking for. Self growth. Like people, they need to want to be better at what they did. And I feel like a lot of salespeople, or like not only salespeople, anybody at their job, if they don't want it or they don't believe in themselves or they don't think it's possible and might not happen to them, I think that's something they need to look into and just change that.
Yeah. Again, going back to, and again, it's a reference point back to Grant Cardone the first time I heard it. And when you apply, in one of the things I do remember, and you don't realize it until you really think about it, it was, I don't know exactly how he phrased it, but it was like, you know what? You're always selling. You're always selling. When you go on a date, you're selling yourself. When you go to impress that girl for the first time, you're selling yourself. You're selling yourself when you go for the job. You're selling yourself when you try to buy something and you're selling your best image of it. And people don't realize that everybody's a salesman. It's just how good of a salesperson are you? But everybody's a salesman. Everybody went and did something and they were a salesman. Good, bad, or indifferent, they still sold themselves or they sold something to get something. So everybody sells from when they were born, right? You know, you're selling yourself when you're crying because, oh, you know what, I fell down, I want the attention, right? You go run through or, you know, your brothers push you down or something like that. You want the attention from mom or dad, right? So you start crying and you pretend like, oh, you know, he knocked me over, right? You're selling yourself. You're selling, you know, so the key is all the way from when you're a kid. It's just
true.
Going back to like you said, though, it's a matter of how passionate you are. You have to have the passion, right? Again, going back to like I said, the customer's on a ledge when they come in, not only in luxury, but even if they're catering to that brand. Again, if it's a domestic brand, even, you know, or an import lower price point, it doesn't matter. It's the same situation that you get into, that you can't bring your negativity or you can't bring your unwillingness or the passion for it. But in the same token, you're only fooling yourself if you don't believe in the product. If you don't like what you're selling, you're going to come across to the customer, right? You know, and I'm not saying you have to love, breathe, and live every minute of whatever you're selling, but you got to believe in it, right? If you're selling something that you don't believe in, you're not going to be as good of a salesman than if you believe in the product. You believe in whatever it is that you're presenting to somebody, right? If you don't believe in yourself, you're not going to go and try to, you know, pick up some, you know, model or something like that you think is way out of your league. And you'd be surprised if you go up there and you just start talking to them, right? You know, it's just, you'd be surprised how many times things like that happen. You know?
Self-belief.
Yeah.
Yeah, and work on yourself. Again, it goes back to the self-growth. So how many of Grant Cardone's book have you actually listened or read?
I have to say, I'm not a big reader.
No.
Now, if I can listen to him, I listen to it, right?
Okay.
I think I got like three or four of his books, obviously, that when he'd come in with the cases and just sit there and sign them and, you know, hand them out to us, which, you know, again, I got to, you know, again, from motivation, it just popped in my head, like one of the events that he did, you know, and he's out of Cleveland, Bernie Marino. He's not a dealer right currently anymore. But the key is what he always did, which I, you know, would love to be at an operation where you can do that on a regular basis, is he always had monthly meetings and he challenged like who is the top salesman from each store, who was the top finance guy from each of the stores, and they would challenge each other, right? But he'd have a breakfast, you know, the first or second day after the end of the month and give out the awards, right? Call the name up, everybody's clapping, you're in this big room. He'd buy a couple more stores, the room got bigger and things like that. But you'd always have something and have a challenge, you know, out there for him and give him something. And who had the best story of the CSI situation, you know, whether somebody was stuck on the side of the road, saw the license plate frame of one of the dealerships or something like that, pulled over, the letter came in, he gave an award to that, right? Again, it's just little things like that that from a management side makes the difference in the store as well when you have something that they can all shoot for and have a little bit of competition, not only from within the store, but if it extends out to the groups. And like I said, he'd have those meetings and he'd bring Grant Cardone in for a couple of those times. and he'd spend the time with you, and individually and the group, but you had that time, or you knew sometimes it was dinner if he was coming in, they'd have a dinner, but usually it would be the breakfast that everybody would meet to. Breakfast was at 7:30, till 8:30, and then the stores open at 9. So when it broke at 8:30, depending on how far your dealership was from where you were having breakfast, you had to run out and get into the office. But it was like you always had that, which was always a nice thing that he did, not only for everybody that worked, but I think it makes a big impression on those people that are especially getting new to selling cars. It's that a reward, right?
Yeah, I highly recommend some of his books. The first one I think I listened to was Sold or Be Sold.
Yep, the Red Book.
Yeah, that one. I did read the 10X, as you said. I thought the main thing was like he's saying like if you think you're gonna do something, just think if you got to do 10 times harder or more to achieve that what you really think is gonna happen, something like that. I found it interesting. There was a couple of them that I read, but yeah, I'm a big fan of him. I again long time ago I got into it, but because of him I started to look into other stuff. I started reading other stuff, other articles from other people and stuff like that. But I totally agree with what you said. Yeah, the whole self-growth, self-belief, and want to do better is a huge must for every salesperson or anybody of any job. Doesn't matter if they're salespeople or not salespeople. So what do you do for your dealership to keep the good salespeople or any salesperson that you have? Is there something you guys actually do right now?
Again, I'm still kind of getting used to the people that had a lot of turnover, different things like that. So it's not like I had a core group like I did at other places.
Sorry to cut you off right now. Is everyone in your team right now, from salespeople, sales manager, finance manager, BDC, people BDC? If you don't know, it's people sitting and just dialing numbers all day long or answer phone calls. And a CSI you mentioned earlier, for those people that don't know, is customer satisfaction reports. So it's like everyone is new. Did you hire everyone, or some of those people from the past are still there?
Very few came before, but ironically, the weird part about it is, I think the oldest salesperson was 10 months before, and then the next tenured sales rep was just 2 months before I started. So everybody's kind of fresh, again, because of a number of different reasons, but it doesn't matter. You can come in and have the old group. Again, I've been in and out of a number of stores, so you can have the old group, whatever. Again, it's trying to find the consistency, but again, evaluating the staff. Where is somebody the best at? Again, you could have great sales staff, but again, if they're not great on writing emails, don't let them respond to the emails. If they're not great on the phones, caution how many times you want them to talk on the phone, because again, it's all about the experience to the customer. It doesn't mean that customer doesn't know everything. That salesperson doesn't know everything about the car. They can talk about it in person. Well, then you let that guy work the people that come in on the showroom. When I was in Beverly Hills, when we were there, I know one of our porters ended up coming down with us down to Santa Monica, and gave him an opportunity to be able to sell cars. And he tried to do it, but I swear he could read the book. He knew every option about the car, and he was personable with the people. But for whatever reason, he couldn't do the sales pitch and be successful at it, right? So anyways, I found the perfect thing for him, and he ended up being the guy that we sold the cars, and he'd be the guy that would go do the products, specialist, go over the cars, go over the delivery. He'd be the one I'd send up sometimes up to the Bay Area. True story. One time flew him into Oakland. He took a Uber or taxi over to the dealer in Walnut Creek, which is just south of Oakland. He picked up a car from them, delivered to a guy in, I think that guy was like in Clovis, which is just, north of Fresno. And I take it back. He went to deliver to Los Gatos, which is south of San Jose. And then he Ubered up to the San Jose dealership, picked up another car that I had lined up at a Maserati dealer there. And then he drove that Maserati, went and gassed it up, washed it, right? Because he was still a porter, but he was dressed not like it. And then he drove over to Clovis, which is outside of Fresno, did the dealer trade. The guy had a lease return, drove the car back. And I did that several times, whether it was down to San Diego or whatever, not as many with 4 deliveries all in the same time going back and forth. But he was perfect at that. And to this day, that's what he does. He goes and he'll be the eyes and ears of going over with the customer, go over all the features and everything like that. And he's great with talking with people, even if we have events where you could have the car on display and he can talk about everything and go over it, as long as they're not talking about sales. So again, it's finding the value in what people are, not to just get rid of them because they don't sell cars. Find the right spot for them, because if it's a good person, it's just a matter of putting him in the right spot,
I
whether it's
totally
in the
agree.
sales department or whatever.
I totally agree. I absolutely love what you just said about have someone that is dedicated to show people the whole after sales, how the car works, set up their Bluetooth, show them how everything works with the new technology in all these cars. Because as we both know, a lot of dealerships, salespeople, their pay is based on commission. So they'll do everything possible to sell the car. But when the car is sold, their interest of showing the car right after it kind of be reduced from 100 all the way down to probably 1 or 2, because they want to go back to start maybe taking another op or talking to somebody else. And the poor customer doesn't get what they deserve as far as the attention after the sale. So what you're doing, hiring someone to do that, it's an absolute huge plus, and I absolutely love that. I used to many years ago work at Infinity, and there was a lady named Grace, and she was the sweetest person ever. And she will take her time. We'll go through the car with the customers, show them exactly everything. By the time that customer leaves, that customer will know more than the salespeople. Like, I absolutely love that. But I've also seen it at the Mercedes dealership. They sell a car, or BMW with all this new technology. The customer comes back. I was talking to one of the sales rep at BMW. It was actually on a podcast. We haven't released the episode yet, but we will. And she was talking about how she sometimes has to come back to work on her day off because there's so much on these cars the customers want to know. But they don't have a dedicated person to show the customer these things. And I think it hurts the dealers.
No, it hurts the brands. And actually
Yes.
going back to, I learned that early on as well, because back in Houston, again, I was the CFO down there and helped do the accounting, and it was a used car dealer doing 300, used cars. We had more, late model Mercedes than the 2 Mercedes dealerships in Houston. We were still sell 300 cars, right? But the owner wanted to get a new car franchise. So I said, okay, well, let's start out with Spyker. I had done a little research, saw that. I'm like, hey, this is easy brand. They're looking for it. They don't have a lot of dealers. I think they had 12 in the country at the time. Price point was around $210,000 to $240,000. And this was probably about
Spyker was hot.
18 years ago, right thereabouts. But to your point, we had a couple of people that owned them there. And one of the guys that lived, and to this day, you stay in loop with the different customers and having that common bond, right? But Spyker was one of those, like, you knew by the last 3 digits of the car, oh, Denny owns 172, or, you'd know the cars by the last 3 of the VIN.
They were numbered.
And you'd be like, okay, 083, we know that's Justice's car up in the Bay Area. Or we'd go through the different cars and we'd know each one. And you got down to a point when you were doing it every day, you memorized it. There'd be a couple people, especially the service, kind of like director operations or whatever for Spyker and the sales guys. And they'd know, like, okay, white 190 car 191. Car 191 was champion silver with Tropicana orange, and it was a La Violette 2-door coupe, right? You got to know what those cars were and how many times you did it. But the point is exactly like you brought up before. This guy, Denny, bought his car from Las Vegas, okay? Who knows what he paid over sticker at the time, but he bought the car. What did Las Vegas do? They just shipped it to him. Okay, you get your car? Okay, fine. He didn't know the first thing, let alone the technology nowadays, like you referenced, right? But he got the car, didn't know how to use it, right? And then over the years, you start seeing, okay, there's another guy that lives in this place, and he got the car shipped to him from Beverly Hills, right? And this was a different guy in the Woodlands, which was north of Houston, right? So there wasn't a dealer, but there were plenty. Obviously, there was money in Texas, and there were probably about 7 different Spykers that were owned within the area. And then you're finding out that they got shipped from Beverly Hills, they got shipped from Las Vegas or Miami or wherever they came from, and nobody went over the car. So that was one thing, even going back to Cleveland, that I knew was very important to do. Even whether I was the GM and sales manager, and it was me and one other guy that also helped do the paperwork and finance. It was a small operation. We were still doing those cars, even being number one with 54 in 2014 in May. But I'd go and deliver the car. I'd coordinate it where that was my 2 days off or my days off, right? I'd ship an Aston Martin out to Laguna Beach and I'd go and pick it up. I'd sell Maseratis to people in California, Beverly Hills, right? And I'd fly out to LA from Cleveland because over the phone, you can still sell the whole distance, and went and delivered the car to them. And that's where, again, going over the features, but giving that personal touch. There's one customer that bought a Aston from me and probably total of 5, 6 cars. He lived in Maui. And I went to the extent of having the car fly out there, pick up the car on transport, did all the registration for him. So you had to stand in line at the tax office, then you had to go to the DMV. And then if anybody's been to Hawaii, you got to get this little big, doesn't matter how expensive your car is, it's like a little square bumper sticker that's got to stick on your car that has to be on it before they give you a safety certification before you get your first set of plates, right? But all those steps I did. Then I traded it, I gave him the first one I delivered. It was a 2012 Aston Martin Virage. I still remember it was, burnt orange, and delivered the car. And his trade-in was a Bentley Continental convertible. So that was my demo or rental car the extra day and a half that I was there, because I delivered his Aston and that's what I drove. And then I had the other car, and then I went over to port, dropped the car off, took the cab over to the airport and flew back from Maui. I delivered 6 cars out to him. I think 4 of them I actually went out there over the time. And then I delivered that. And he's like, I want to order a Vanquish. When can I order it? And I'm like, okay, allocation isn't out yet. And then he was overtime, gave him a couple different cars. But even down to different places. I mean, I delivered a Spiker up to Kalamazoo, Michigan, right? But again, it's about the experience and go over the features. Now, I will admit, sometimes you don't do that, or you don't do it timely. Trying to remember, I think it was when I was in Cleveland, I sold an Aston Martin to a guy in Dallas. The guy was so grateful for the deal I gave him that he kept inviting me, come on down, I'll put you up in a place and we'll go out to dinner. And, I owe you so much. And to this day, we'll still have the common bound with him, which again, it's all about the relationships, right? So anyways, true story, about a year after, I finally went down to Dallas for a weekend, put me up at a Meridian hotel. We went out to dinner, this, that, whatever. He's in his car. And on the V8 Vantage that he bought, there's a sport button. He goes, well, what's that for? I said, well, you're driving the car. You're not using the sport button. I said, that's why it's choppy when you shift gears, because it was an automated manual transmission. I said, you put it in sport, it's going to rev higher, and the car's going to run better. Okay, shame on me. It was a year that I didn't make sure he knew how to use it. Okay, I didn't fly down there. I didn't send somebody to go do it, right? So you learn from your mistakes, right?
That's true.
But I showed him that, and I can't tell you how many times after I left, whether it was weeks, months, he's like, man, I felt like I got a brand new car. This thing drives like it's brand new beast. I love this thing. Man, that sport button makes a world of difference. So again, to your point, even now there's more technology in the cars. We have to go over it. You have to do a delivery, a redelivery, and maybe a month or 2 months or a week later, you got to follow up with them, because there's too much that it's overload for them when you're delivering it, for them to remember everything or know how to do it. And they're not necessarily going to call you up unless they have an issue they can't figure out. So you have to call them up and offer, hey, do you want a redelivery? Can I meet you at the office? Can I meet you at your house? Whatever's convenient, you can come in. Let's go over the car with you, because those are the little things that make the difference as well, from delivery to redelivery of the cars. So people are happy with your service.
Yeah. So this is something that I wanted to talk to you about, because I think you'd be the perfect person to answer this. I always thought one of the big reasons why salespeople don't do that, it's because back when I started selling cars, the way salespeople were getting paid was totally different. Right now, the commission and the hourly wages, because the new laws or whatnot, they're designed in a way that the salespeople are not getting what they believe they're not getting paid well for their efforts. So when they sell a car, they totally want to jump on the next sale or somehow figure out a different way to sell another car. So they forget about the customer and that the customer needs them to help him with the, you know, transaction of, start owning the car and taking delivery of the car. And I'm a big believer salespeople kind of forget that, or they don't forget that, they just don't pay too much attention to it because they feel like then I'm not getting paid too much. And if I sit with the client and it's going to take me 2, 3, 4 hours delivering this car with all this technology, then I need to be out there selling another car. And I think that's one of the big reasons. And I don't know, what do you think as a general manager? Like, because obviously you understand you need someone to
Yeah.
delivery, but I'm talking about for the dealers, they don't have a dedicated person.
Yeah, so the time and that they spend in it, they look at it the way you had mentioned. They get the commission check, they sold the car, they're ready to move on to the next one, right? But what you're losing opportunity is the relationship that you created if you had a good one, right? And then the referrals that you're going to get down the business, right? Let alone, I can't tell you how many times, even from the guys that I sold cars out in Cleveland to out to California, right? There's one guy that every time I kept coming closer and closer to him, he's like, okay, I'm on my second Maserati. I'm on my third lease Maserati with you, right? Oh, I finally met you, because they live down in Newport. So when I moved out, right, I was in Pasadena, then Beverly Hills, and Santa Monica, and still selling them cars. And anyways, it's about that relationship. You got to keep that going and just do the follow-up, right? I've thought of it many times. The other thing for those people out there thinking about a creative pay plan, right? You shouldn't give them the full commission when they sell the car, right? In fact, one of the things we did recently is making sure that you get the commission, but part of the selling the car, your commission on the deal isn't paid until all the steps are done, right? So it's obviously selling the car, right? But then it's a 1-day follow-up, 2-day follow-up, 1-week follow-up, right? And if you don't do all those steps, well then, okay, hey, Frank, you know what? You want to go do the follow-up on this customer and go over the features and you can get half of the deal, right? One, it's because if people don't feel like it cost them something, then they're not going to learn, right? It's got to cost. It doesn't have to be monetary, but there's got to be something that they feel and make the impression, right? Just like the old jokes at the old, schools, and you get cracked with, a ruler on your hand, you're going to remember, right? But it's just a matter of they have to know that there's more to it, right? If you pay the money, hey, I already got paid, I'm moving on, right? But then you're never going to do the follow-up,
So
right?
is this something you guys do right now?
Yeah. We do that currently. And again, is it 100%? Not yet, right? Because it takes time, it takes follow-up, it takes making sure. Or the other option is you pay half the commission up front, and you pay the other half when all those steps are done, right? And if you never finish all the steps, you'll get paid that when you finish doing all the follow-up. And then again, it gets into CSI, which we talked about, which is customer satisfaction. And a lot of the manufacturers, not as much on luxury, but with our brands, they do it as well. You need that satisfaction survey, right? In a lot of places, they cook the books, not necessarily from the dealership, but from the manufacturers, right? They got to buy the surveys. We got to get this, we got to get that, right? To me, it's a matter of doing the follow-up, even if you have the bad past, right?
Follow-up is a must.
So you need to have somebody do the follow-up and call the customers and find out, like, okay, how was your delivery Friday night, Frank? And then you ask them and you go over the details and they're like, oh, you know what? Everything was great. Salesman was good, but man, it took too long to go into finance, right? Well, right there, you already got a little negative impression. So what you got to do is go over with that customer and say, sorry, Frank, I know that was an inconvenience for you and it cost you time. Your time I know is valuable. So what can we do to help offset your time? You're not buying the survey. You're empathetic about the customer and their experience of their inconvenience and what it cost them their time, right? You're compensating them for the time. Oh, you know what? I forgot this in my car and this and that. Well, okay, well, you know what? Tell you what, we're going to send you a gift card, right? Gas card if they're coming in. Or if you got a beef, right? Give an example. Sometimes with manufacturers, your bad CSI survey from the month before ends up being thousands of dollars per car. So when you sell 100 cars or more, plus or minus the next month, it costs you a lot more than buying that $500 gift card to Mastro's, or give them a
Satisfy the customer.
$500 gas card, for their inconvenience of their time. Oh, they didn't fill my gas tank. Okay, we'll give them a $500 gift card for, what's not just get a gas card, right? What's their most important thing? In fact, I had a CSI girl that she does a lot of the call follow up, and she mentioned something to somebody, and I told her, you got to offer this stuff when there's a little bump in the road. You got to offer something to them. So, I don't know the exact situation that happened, but she offered him a gas card. And she's like, hey, you know what? How do I got to go about getting that? This was a couple days ago. I said, well, did you find out where she wants it, the gas card from? Oh, did I need to? I said, well, think about it. I was like, if I go get her a gas card to Ralph's gas card, right, and there's no Ralph's gas around her, is that going to be another inconvenience, right? So I said, call the customer back and say, we're going to get that gas card like I promised you. But what's
It's just a Visa card.
what's the most convenient for you, right? It's a matter of, again, okay, if you go to Shell, you go to Amoco, you go to Chevron, whatever gas station you go to, make it convenient for them. If that's the one they pass by, right? Even if it's the most expensive one on the corner, right? That they don't go to, but hey, you're going to give me a gas card, give me a gas card over at this store, right? But the point is make it something even more special to them rather than just, okay, here's a gas card. And the only one that's local to me, I got to go out of my way every time I use it, right? It doesn't matter what the content is. It's a matter of being conscious of the inconvenience that was created, or the car wasn't clean. Okay, everybody will say, oh, we'll come back in, we'll detail it at some point in time. Well, that's an inconvenience for their time. So to make up for their time, what can we do for you, right? Always do a little bit more, but in the long run, it'll save you a lot more money giving out things for their inconvenience or what wasted their time, or whatever you got. I mean, if they come in and they got kids, you want to go get them something special for the kids. Again, a little more personal touch is going to get you a lot further with what you do for them. Oh, you don't have to get something for me. Okay, well, tell you what, I know when your daughter and son were here, what were they, about 8, 10 years old? I think I remember, what can I get for them? Oh, you don't have to get something. They're fine, right? But you just do something
Just
extra, but it's going to be a lot less than what that bad CSI could cost you the next month or the next quarter, right? So again, it's like an old pay it forward, right? If you're not conscious of it ahead of time, it'll cost you a lot more down the road.
Got it. So based on what you're saying is customer satisfaction is extremely important to you and your team. And this is a perfect time for me to say that I'd like to say thank you to Van Nuys, Maserati, and Alfa Romeo for sponsoring this episode. Mark was kind enough to offer a special for every listener, or if you're watching this podcast on one of our channels, and a special discount that you can actually use on top of any other current specials that are going on right now. All you have to do, just say that you heard about this on Line East podcast, and you could call over there, send an email, however you like to contact him, but make sure you let him know that you heard this on Line East podcast, and you get an additional $500 on any specials they currently have, or if is there a car that you like that is not on a special, you still get that too. And they will also have a special leases. I don't have them at this time while we're talking about it, but I will have it in the near future, and I will announce it for you guys. And we will definitely make sure to write it in the description area for you guys to check it out. So this brings us to another question. Automotive industry is changing.
Big
From
time.
yes, from the time that me and you started in this business, everything has changed with the electric cars, with everything going online. I remember when I started, it was like Auto Trader magazine where people go through. It's like they had this gigantic yellow payments and whatnot. So everything has changed, right? So what do you and your team, what does Maserati and Alfa Romeo do to stay ahead of all these changes? And what do you think automotive industry is going towards?
It's hard to answer to some extent because a lot of the content of the market is nothing like we thought it would be, right? I mean, years back, everything was a dealership, right? Especially here in California, most people know of Tesla, right? Tesla's not a dealership, right? Some people may think it's a dealership, but it's not owned by, dealers as old dealerships were, and just how to some extent it can monopolize the market and give it a change that they didn't expect. Now you got a lot of other brands that are, jumping in and doing similar things, Karma and Fisker and VinFast and Rivian and a lot of these other brands are challenging to try to do it. But already it's like somebody saying, hey, I'm going to go open up and be competitive to Costco, right? I mean, who's going to do that, right? I'm not saying that something will change 5, 10 years from now. Might not be anything along the lines of Costco. It'll be something totally different because, again, 10, 20 years ago back, there wasn't a Costco and there wasn't, things the way they are now. So nobody ever knows what it is. And people try the online buying. But again, when it gets to it, it goes back to, sure, you can buy a car online, ship the car online, and it shows up at your address, wherever it is in the state. But just go back to the point that we talked about. Who's going to go over the features with them? Who's going to go over those options? How are they going to know how to use it? Sure, you can do some of it virtual, but it's all about the personal touch, right? It's all about the touches with the customer, not the physical touches, but the touches, the touch points that you're going over these features, these options, these details about the car, whether they purchased it already or after the purchase. The point is there still has to be a personal interaction, right? I mean, some people like it, some people don't, but it's just like going to the grocery store, right? We go there now and you can see 12 aisles and maybe one's open. And then you got the kiosk that you got to ring up your own stuff, bag it yourself, decide whether you're buying a bag or whatever you're doing, but you got to do it all yourself. Again, some people don't mind that, but again, where's the personal touch in it, right? Just like if you go to the airport now, some of the places you have no you just walk in, you got your card, you got it with them, you scan it to get in, the gate opens up, you go pick out whatever you want. When you walk out, it rings up on your card. Like,
Yeah, it's so funny you said that because I think even, especially when you go to luxury brands, I think that personal touch becomes more and more important. That relationship with the salesperson, because the higher up you go, that salesperson actually handles way more things than just doing a test drive with you.
yep.
But this is what I want to also ask you. What do you think what are the few things that causing Tesla to do so good and sell so many cars? Because I actually thought about this. And this is something I spent some time trying to figure out why are people like to purchase Tesla? Besides the fact that it was a cool factor, it was the new thing on the block and all the cool technology and whatnot, the gigantic screen. But I think there's more to it than just that cool factor. One, me and you will understand this because we have been in this business. A lot of people don't feel confident about going into a dealership or don't even go in. Just pick up a phone and call somebody and start negotiating or send an email and negotiate. A lot of people don't feel comfortable about the whole negotiation part. Right. And I think it's because it doesn't matter how good they negotiate. There's always a chance that they didn't get a good deal.
Right.
Like
there's always that doubt in their mind.
Exactly. Yeah. But if they go to Tesla, there's no negotiation. The price you see is what everybody else is paying. And you don't have to feel confident about going in and like, no, I want lower price, I want higher price, or you give me more for this or give me less for that.
But in the same token,
could that be something?
Yeah, but that's the weird part about it, right? Yeah. Because even going back to Grant Cardone training things, right, or references, it's just like Tesla. Yeah, that's the price. You buy it or you don't. When you go and you buy a Coach purse, you don't negotiate. You go into Fendi, here's the price. You go into Prada, there's the price, right? But it's weird. They walk into a dealership, not everybody, but some people, they think there's room to be had, right? I mean,
I think it's because they were trained that way.
No, right.
Many years ago.
But you don't. But now you're buying cars, and you're buying cars thinking, wait a minute, it's still a car. Just because it's not a quote unquote dealership, right? You're still buying it from a salesperson or associate or whatever they call themselves, right? You're still doing the whole process. You got to get your plates. You got to do this. You got to pay your tax on the car. The process is the same, right? It's not any different, right? And maybe they'll deliver it to your house, which you can still do, like I referenced as well. But the point is, they still want to negotiate. That's the weird part about it, right? They're still buying cars. It's the same thing, but they're looking to see for the negotiating process. And many times people have tried like, hey, no haggle pricing, one price store. They give you the details of that, right? And even then, it's like they still want to get more for it. But then you get these subscription-based, stores or places like Tesla and things like that, and it's like, here's the one price. So that's the weird part about it, I guess. But the control of that is because no different than if it was Maserati or if it was Mercedes or BMW. If they made it a policy, this is the price and there's no negotiating on it, then it would be acceptable, right? Even Ferrari, that actually is one of probably the strongest manufacturer brand out there that has control of keeping the value in their cars. Sure, they've made some bad cars, the FF and different cars that really failed for them, but they got out of it quick, and they still make a few current, mistakes that didn't work 100% the way they want it. But they got it dialed in. They know how to build the structure. People will copy that. Lamborghini tries, Bentley tries, everything like that. Luckily, COVID helped out a few of those exotic brands in Rolls-Royce too, and got them back on the game, right? Because there was the shortage. Besides the ship going down that had, thousands of cars on the ship that were people's sold orders, be they Porsche or, Bentley or the different cars that were out there, right? Audis. The point is that the supply and demand all came down to it. And now they were able to say, okay, we're going to hold tight on the price a little bit, or we're only going to build so many cars. That's always been the failure of a lot of manufacturers, which Tesla has monitored. And maybe that's where part of the strength is. Along the lines, the correlation to Ferrari is we're only going to build so many cars until we build too many. But even the most recent thing, some of the articles you read on Tesla is they built too many cars, because they didn't realize how many more electric cars were coming into the picture that people wouldn't continue keep buying their cars. But up until that point, they had it all dialed in, right? They knew, hey, we're going to build these many cars. We're going to get the orders. We know what to build. We're not going to build too many. You can control the price. It's not like you got an overstock and they're all sitting out there. And when they did, unfortunately, did what most manufacturers do. Okay, we got to start doing rebates. Now they didn't do rebates to the customer, but what do? They drop the price. And there's plenty of Tesla owners that aren't probably happy because they bought their car from a while ago, and then when the new ones get discounted, even if you're buying it through the same platform as Tesla does versus a dealer, they're not getting a direct discount, but the price went down.
Yes.
So I bought the car at the full sticker, but now all of a sudden it's less. So now they're cycling back into a correlation of what the dealerships were. But for the longest time, it wasn't. Exactly like you said. They paid the price. This is the price. Take it or leave it. If you want a Tesla, this is what the price would be for that Model S or, the Model 3 or
whichever, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think one of the reasons that they were able to do that is because they have full control. The problem with dealers like other brands like Mercedes, BMW is just like there is absolutely no control. Toyota, there is no control. Like whatever the dealership wants to do, if they want to charge $100,000 on top of a $10,000 car, there's no one to say no to it. Like I remember, this is actually last week, someone contacted me. They have a car that they bought exactly not even 6 months yet. They are down $22,000 on the value. And then I was like, okay, so how is this possible? I mean, what could you possibly buy that lost so much? It's like, well, they wouldn't sell me the car. They told me I need to buy this, I need to buy that. Because that dealership is in control to do what they want. But with Tesla, they have the full control. I don't believe Tesla wants their clients to be screwed any way or of any shape. Yes, they do discounts, especially towards the end of the year. Obviously, they have to sell whatever is left from the previous year. And I think a lot of times they discount. It could be because maybe they're built too many of those. But I think a lot of people lease those anyway with Model 3s and Model Ys. Yeah. You have to give them back anyway. So then people don't really, yes, they will have lower payments now because the prices are lower. But in general, I think is one of the reasons they've been successful because they made it easy for people to go and get what they want. I never forgot what happened one time. And this is like something I experienced. I remember we were at a Mercedes dealership. I have a good friend of mine. His wife was like, "You're not gonna believe what he did last night," and I was like, "What did he do?" He's like, "We're having dinner, and all of a sudden he's telling me I'm about to order my next car." And I'm like, "Okay, what is it?" And it was that Model S, not the Plate. Before Plate, they used to be called something else. I forgot.
Yeah, yeah, I know.
The performance model. Yeah, the Model S Performance, I think it was called. The one like 0 to 60 was so fast. While he was having dinner with his wife, he ordered the car. I mean, that was just genius.
Yeah.
But I think he did that because he didn't have to worry about walking into a Mercedes dealership the next day and start negotiating on S-Class. Okay, well, how much can I get at this one? Then go to another dealership, go to another dealership.
Right.
I think that was one of the main reasons.
And that does make a difference when you have total control of it, and it's not only the control by the manufacturer, whichever brand it
Distribution,
is,
yeah.
it's the control of the dealer as well, because not having all the same ownership, right? Everybody's going to do things different, right? You got to compete with the other guys. You got to do this. You got to do that, right? But that's where, even going back to like I referenced that, it goes back to when I said I worked at a dealership, and I'm like, but I'm not a salesman, right? Because the demeanor of what people always thought if you worked at a dealership,
They're
you were a
guards.
sales guy. And I can't tell you how many times I do all the accounting. Oh, you're the guy who go sign all the paperwork. No, I'm not the finance guy. I'm the accounting guy. I'm the guy that works in the back that makes sure the checks get paid, make sure the payroll's done, and this and that, right? And they're like, oh, okay, I know. But like you said, they come in, and again, it's the facade. It's a matter of getting off the topic, get to that common bond, talk about the thing that all of a sudden there's, the old phrase, everybody's got, something in common with somebody. It's just a matter of when you can find it or where you can get that correlation to, and how many times, people will call up and just start that conversation of where or whatever that thing is. And it makes a difference, and it goes to the relationships. And then it's not like an experience of buying a car, right? It's about a relationship. When I got a customer I sold a couple cars to, he's got an Italian restaurant down outside of Fort Myers, Florida. And, I think it's 3 cars I've helped him with or whatever, but he'll still get to a point, like I'll get text messages from him before friends and relatives sometimes when it's Happy Father's Day, or it's, have a great 4th of July or whatever. And it's like, this is a guy I sold a car to, right? And whether I met him or not, I even sold the cars before I even met him face to face, and those experiences is what the other key is, that, you'll never know if you don't go the extra distance to know and offer things to people, which again, that personal touch isn't always there, but the facade or the image of a car salesperson is the biggest thing that people are afraid of, right? Because like you referenced, they always think they could have maybe gotten a better deal, right? But again, if you give them service, it doesn't come down to the money. I can't tell you how many times, a lot of the times, the people that are the ones that are looking and the ones whittling away at the price are not really the best benefit for even a dealer, right? And I mean that genuine, because the thing is like, okay, there's shortcuts going to be made. You're going to aggravate the salesman. You're going to aggravate different people in the process. The experience isn't the same. They're not going to enjoy the purchase of the car, right? That's just the reality of what happens. But then on the flip side, when you got somebody that knows, like, it's just like when you go somewhere. People, I use an example a lot of times that I'll have. Unfortunately, I only have one, but I got a couple different pens, right? That I'll always give an example. And you take your pen, now this is a Bentley pen, but
nice.
but you take your pen that you got in your hand, or your stylus,
Yeah.
but you'll have you have 3 different pens, right? They all write. They're all the same thing. Whether you use that when you're on a sales interview with a salesperson, and the classic thing is like, here, sell me this pen, right? But here, feel this pen for a sec, and you can tell it's a different pen just from the weight and from the thing. I used to have one that was an Aston Martin pen that was carbon fiber. Obviously, it was lighter, right? They all do the same purpose, right? It's just like when you get a purse at Coach or wherever people buy all the stuff, they got to have the latest and greatest, Louis Vuitton, whatever it is. It's a purse. It can be the same thing to carry everything that you have, just like a car. It gets you to and from wherever you want to go. right? It's all about
How it makes you feel.
the experience and how it makes you feel. And you don't mind paying more for something if it makes you feel good because of how other people may look at you or other people may feel about you having that. Or some people, it's just about how it makes you feel. Like, I've been able to afford this, right? I'm able to get this myself. And, it's an impression. You save up for it or whatever the case is. But it's little things like that that are really the key to going back to the experience, to whether they mind paying more for it. If they get, you can go to a hotel same way, right? I'm not saying you got to stay at a Motel 6, but from a Motel 6 to a Four Seasons, there's plenty of hotels between it. And nowadays there's a lot of boutique hotels, right? But the experience that you have at it is what makes the difference. Because at the end of the day, you go someplace to shower, you go someplace to put your head down, sleep overnight, go wherever you're at. People don't mind paying a lot of money, and sometimes as long as it's clean and it makes a difference, that's all that matters to them, right? But it serves a purpose. The purpose with the auto industry is whatever they want to pay for a car. It's not always about the negotiating part. It's a matter of, do they feel like they got a good value for what they're getting in exchange, whether it's the experience or the product itself.
I think it was Warren Buffett said, price is what you pay, value is what you get. And I think a lot of times salespeople, especially, they forget that a lot of times that the customers keeps asking for lower price, or they decide to go talk to wife or husband or whoever and they want to leave, is because they fail to show value for what they were selling. True. If you can't show the value, in my opinion, if you fail at showing the value and how people could benefit from having whatever you're selling, could be a pen, could be staying at a hotel, 5 stars or whatever, you're not going to get the sale. And if people don't see the value in it, they want the cheapest, the least price they can possibly pay for.
And even on that note, if people disagree with that, I'll give you a perfect example. When's the last time you went to the movie, right? And you can buy, a bottle of Coke, whatever size it is, and you can buy it for all kinds of different prices.
Yep.
But there's nothing more frustrating than when you go to a movie and you get this, whether it's a big cup or even a small cup, and you see how much you paid for that cup of soda, and it's like, wait a minute, did I get a value? This is the same thing I can go get somewhere else for a fraction of the price, and it's, might not even be as good a quality, but you know what? It has to do with where you're at. And okay, I'm at the movie, you got to have, something to drink, to wash the popcorn down or whatever. But you look at the price of some of the stuff sometimes of what you're paying, and if you really break down and think about it, it's like, people pay it anyways. It's just, but you feel better if you got some value out of it, right? It makes the experience of the movie better as well.
I was going to say, it's all about the experience they give you.
Right.
With all the extra butter and, on the popcorn, all that stuff. No, going back to it again, I think a lot of times people forget the fact they need to show value. If I fail to show you value, people don't want to pay me what I'm asking for.
Right.
They want less for it. My other question is, what do you think, or what is your view on dealerships that hire sales managers from outside? And what is your view on dealership that they promote salespeople within? And the reason I ask you this is because we both know a lot of people are in management, especially in automotive industry. And the reason I'm asking this, because a lot of people listen to this, if they are in automotive industry, this is something that a lot of salespeople do not agree with, okay? And that is dealerships bring someone from outside and not promoting within. However, what is your view on hiring from outside or promoting from one of the salespeople that you already have among your salespeople?
I think in each individual situation, it makes a little bit of difference. If you have somebody that can fill the role and has gone through the different steps of becoming the sales manager, the general sales manager, the general manager, whatever it is, and they have that.
You mean the training?
The training and the hands-on experience, right? If they've done that job and they've performed at it and they've made the difference at it, then to me, by all means, it should come from within, because anybody new coming in, the first thing is anywhere I went in new, right? I never went in there like a bull in a china shop and changed things, right? Because you'll never learn how to correct things, right? The key is coming in and not really doing much of anything from change, right? You know you have to make a difference, but you don't want to go change a lot of things because first you want to know how it works, right? Things are easier to fix when you know how it works, right? If you know how it works, then it's easier to go through the process of improving it. Again, a lot of times there's a lot of good employees, but they're in the wrong position. Ironically, and I referenced to you, and it's been a number of years, many years, all the way back to Beverly Hills or, one of the earlier days in California, and I was on a different podcast, not in person like this. It was over the phone. And the topic was, and we got onto a similar question of like a lot of stores, you got a general manager, and they're basically a glorified general sales manager that just sold a ton of cars for a dealer. And basically, because he sold so many cars for him and made him a lot of money, he moved up the chain and got a GM position, right? Well, that's great, but a general manager position is not a sales manager. That just runs the sales department. It's to run all the other operations of the dealership and oversee, even know what the accounting and the financial side of it is. But time and time again, and that was the topic that they brought up, was like, have you ever worked at a spot where you had glorified, general sales managers that were GM spots, right? No different than sometimes people were sales managers and there were a good top salesman and they're working in a store and they've got a sales manager and overseeing them. And it's like the guy doesn't know how to sell a car himself, but sometimes because it's family or because it's a relationship of what they put into play, but it might not be the right person. So moving them up the ladder, if they have that, going back to my old days, I had a service cashier that to this day, she's a controller, right back outside of Chicago, but she started as a service cashier working part-time. She went through different steps of the accounting office and I trained her. And then we moved to a different dealership, or I moved first, and then she came over because I had a spot for her. And I saw the value of what she did and moved through the process. And then I left, and then she stayed there as an office manager, took my spot because I trained her up to an assistant manager. And still, occasionally, not as much now, but, at different times she'll call me and say, hey, Mark, how do I do this? How do I do this? Or what do you do in this situation? She had an owner pass away and she had to help, divvy up different parts within the books and, hey, how do you do this? And it always gives you a good feeling when you had somebody that you started a lower position that you moved up through the ranks, right? At the same store or even at a different one because you know where that progression is, right? But then also to the people that haven't moved up the ladder yet within the store, they see the possibility of it. And again, going back to the core part is knowing the team. If you know the people, that's the other first thing you got to do when you come into a dealership or a new job, anywhere the job is. It doesn't have to be at a dealership. You could be a brand new time you walk into, whatever job it is that you're doing. You got to get to know everybody first, right? And then, okay, who does what? Well, here again, you're going to get a lot more progress by putting somebody in a spot that already knows the operation and moves forward with the direction of the owner, the direction of the dealer group, if it's a mega group or whatever the case is. It's going to be a stronger point than, okay, I got this guy that came in and then all of a sudden somebody clears house and hires all their own people that they knew from different places. Not that that doesn't work out sometimes, but again, it just depends on the strength of the people that were there before the move. Sometimes it works out, but in most cases it is better when it moves from
inside.
Within.
Gotcha. Yeah, because a lot of times when someone comes from outside, they also bring their own way of doing things, and they have a different culture,
Right.
and that might not be a right fit with
Good
the culture
point.
that you already have.
Yeah. And then it disrupts the culture that was already built or starting to be built at that operation.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, the reason I asked that because I had just recently had a conversation with someone. He's a salesperson at a dealership, and he was upset because they brought someone from outside, and no one from inside got the chance to. It was actually a finance manager job, not a sales manager job, but none of the salespeople. There were a couple that were begging for the job. However, they didn't get it, and they were all pissed off, and they were all thinking of leaving the dealership because of that.
But in one comment on that, sometimes, there's reasons for the decision. Because again, if you're at a growing spot, case in point, I had a couple salespeople at the dealership that at Van Nuys, and they were salesmen and said, "Oh, I want to do finance." Right. Well, part of it is okay. They think, "Oh, the finance guy makes more money." Right. Going back to my
why,
days.
yeah.
Right. But again, they're the last one out at the end of the night and things like that too. But they know there's more to it. But if you're not trained, right, upper management still has to make the decision. There's a training period, right? You can't just take somebody and say, "Hey, Frank, come on in. I'll let you be the finance manager," right? Especially nowadays, there's so much compliance issues. There's so much paperwork that's got to be documented right, even more in California than other states. But the point is you got all these things that somebody's got to learn and know how to do. Not that you can't train them, but there's a lot of training. Now, can you afford the dip in the business for them to learn it? Now, the better route is, okay, fine, if you want to start to learn it, start to shadow the finance person when
Take
it's a
some time.
slower day, start to work through the process. Because again, moving into some of those spots, sometimes you have to do what's right for the business, which if you're not selling enough cars, you're not doing enough things, or the finance guy isn't making enough profit to make that operation work, getting somebody new that's inexperienced may or may not work. Now, that's not to say that sometimes it doesn't, because sometimes the best salesperson is the guy that doesn't know too much, the guy that doesn't pick up the bad habits from all the other salespeople, right? A lot of times you'll get a new salesperson, might not have sold cars before, and all of a sudden he's the top dog, at the end of that month, and it's because he doesn't know better. But then all of a sudden he starts seeing what everybody else does. Oh, they don't go on go over the detail of the car with the customer. They don't do the follow-up. And then all of a sudden they start taking shortcuts, and then they don't sell as many cars. And it's like, what happened?
Start
Right?
picking up the bad habits.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
just-
That makes sense. So if you're gonna give an advice to someone at a car dealership that wants to move up, what would that be?
So the best thing is, whichever spot it is, start to ask in some downtime, right? That you want to start to get to know it. Start early enough. Show the interest, because sometimes people might not even know the interest. If you don't speak up,
Yeah.
right? If you don't speak up, they don't know, and then they don't work that scenario in. And if you show some interest, understand that it's going to take some time. You're not gonna, it's not. Some things aren't an easy process, right? Like if we said, okay, let's go in, the kitchen and we'll go cook omelets. You never cooked an omelet before. Okay, I can cook one and then I can show you, and then you can follow through the steps, right? Yeah. It's not like yours might burn. Some people's might or might not turn out right, right? But the point is, even if I'm fancy flipping the pot the fancy way and stuff like that, the point is it might not be as easy as you think it is.
Or might
right?
not be what you actually wanted it.
Or what you want, right? Yeah. So test the waters, right? It's not just, oh, well, look at it. He doesn't hardly do anything. I sell the car, I bring it in there. He gets, he does his little thing, and he's making more money than us, and we have to go on a test drive. We have to do all the follow-up. We have to do all the emails. We have to do all the text message follow-up, everything to the customer. And then after they buy it, we got to follow up with them and do all that stuff. And here, all this guy's got to do is do paperwork and be done with it, right? Mm. Well, if you don't witness all the different steps of what they have to do as finance, as an example, or sales manager or whatever, there's a lot more to it than what you might not see.
100%.
So start to show the interest so you can realize whether that's something you really want. Because in the same token, nobody ever wants to move forward and then go backwards, right? So why would you want to jump in and take the leap for that spot until you understand it and know you can do good and know that it is what you're looking to do?
What you truly want. Okay, now, this one is a tough one, okay? In your opinion, what's the biggest mistake that dealers make that prevent them from performing better? Dealer as a whole.
Think they're better than what they are.
That was a good one.
Or they have no issues. They have no problems. That's always the other thing. Again, part of this goes back to my controller days, and I don't want to say the name of it, but, there's a very, very large auto dealer group, okay, in the country, especially in Southern California. And back in my controller days, everybody like, oh, these big groups, they got everything perfect, this and that, whatever, and I was doing a consulting thing for them and went into their books. And it's like, for the most part, I can go into somebody's, accounting books and still find something, no matter how great the operation is. And people will be like, no, you can't. We run everything perfect. Everything's great, this, that, whatever, right? Nobody's ever perfect. None of us are perfect, right? You have to make mistakes to learn from your mistakes to improve your process, right? Make as many mistakes, even going back to, the heck was it, 1988?
Man,
I
you look
think
so young,
89.
though. You look so young.
And I had an owner tell me, he goes, it was what they call a Motors holding store, which was part owned by General Motors, and through profits, the dealer would buy back more of the stores. Well, I take it back. That was right after I stopped with him, but prior to that dealership, it was an old Pontiac dealership, and the owner said, "You know what? I got a lot of money. I need you to help bring my son up to the process of taking over my spot when I go and retire." And he goes, "I know you're going to, you have to learn from your mistakes. Be confident enough for your decision. And as long as you can justify your decision, go with it. It's a lot better," and people have heard this, it's a lot better to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission, right? He goes, "And I know you're going to make mistakes, and I know they're going to cost me money. Hopefully they don't cost me too much money, so don't make too many mistakes or don't make a big mistake. But if you're not told that early on and learn that thought process early on in many aspects, that makes a big difference, right? Because you have to be willing to make the decision, make the commitment, decide, instantaneously if it takes it sometimes to do something and make the action, right? And if you don't do that, sometimes you never know what it's going to lead you to, right? But anyways, when I did that, it was you start to learn on it when you make your mistakes, right? Because you have to learn from that so you know what not to do the next time, right? It's no different whatever sport it is, right? Boxing match or whatever it is. You're going to take a beating the first few times. You don't just walk into the match and then end up winning, right? You think of what ends up happening during that fight, and hopefully, you don't get too injured. But you learn from that, and that's where you know what to do different the next time, right? It's doing things over to simplify it, but you got to have that experience to learn from your experience of what changes things.
So what I got out of it was you're saying that they should try different things, even though if it might not be the right thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you never know. There might be something you enjoy better, right? I go back to where I said when you go into a place and you could have established staff, but if you've got them in the wrong spot, it's never going to work, right? It's like the old game perfection. You got the square pegs, you got the round pegs, you got the, triangle. You got to put them in the right square, right? And then it's going to be complete, right? It's going to be finished. But you got the right pegs. It's just finding the right hole that they need to fit within an operation. And again, it doesn't have to be just a dealership. It can be any business or any job that you're working at. It's a matter of finding where you feel the most comfortable. Because again, something you enjoy doing, you're always going to do better. If you don't enjoy what you're doing, you're not going to be the best that you can be, and you're not going to do the best.
Yeah. And another thing that I think, my opinion is a lot of dealerships, especially the ones that have been doing it for a long time, they're not open to new ideas.
Right.
And that's what's holding it back. And I saw this firsthand in one of the big groups. I had a talk with one of the general managers, and he was trying to figure out why the sales are not where it's supposed to be. I actually made 17 pages of presentations for him to what he might be willing to try. And I gave it to him, and he never even looked at it. And I asked him a couple months after, I said, "So what do you think about that idea at the end of the presentation?" And he's like, "Frank, I never even looked at it. I didn't have a chance." I know he didn't look at it because he just thought he knew better.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, one of those issues.
No, and you're right. I mean, that's, this is how we always did it, right?
Yeah. It worked 100 years ago, so it's going to work now.
And even just the way it's always been done, right? What the heck? So even just today, I had the same situation today. What the heck was it? the process with the technician, right, of doing certain things, and they have to document their work and do this. And because there's all this extra work for them documenting, and it takes time uploading videos, because now we got videos. In the old days, you didn't have that. But now when there's more that the manufacturer wants to cover the warranty repairs, they want things documented, right? And it's not documented for any bad reason. It's so they can learn and fix the problems, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, they don't get paid. Well, that's the way it's always been. And I went down, I'm like, wait a minute, I'm going to go talk to the tech. Went down there with the manager, and we're going over the process, and he's telling me, he was like, come on, I've been a technician for 14 years. He goes, this is how the process has been. We have to do all this diag time, and we don't get paid for it. We have to follow their steps before they approve it. I'm like, well, just because it's been 14 years, it doesn't mean we can't still try to fight it and make it change, right? You're doing different things because of how it was working. There's always an opportunity for change. It's just convincing somebody to make the change, like you said.
Yeah, that's a good point. And good for you for doing that. Now, here's a fun one. Is there any stories, any memories that you have, something fun, and something that stuck with you, any experience that was fun in automotive sales or in automotive business, or it could be something else. It could be for when you were a fireman.
Oh, there's too many stories. We'd
Fun
be here
ones,
a long time.
fun ones, just
Funny?
big one.
Well, some things we find funny, but other people don't find funny though too.
That's
but,
good for you.
Let's see.
Okay, if you don't,
I'm going to give you a perfect example. Actually, I just two popped in my head, but along the same correlation.
okay,
I was working in San Francisco doing some, consulting work. They had a Vespa store up there, not open right now, but Vespa, little Italian
Scooters,
scooter. And the parts manager was a diehard San Francisco, Giants fan.
yeah,
And I mean, he knew everything inside and out, this and that. And of course, the name's gonna Tim something. It's gonna slip my mind. But the year that they won this is probably 10 years ago. I don't know, something like that. But the year they won the championship, World Series, right? And Tim, the small pitcher, whatever, he was a dialed-in pitcher that they had. Anyways, he came in after the season, and this guy would talk about everything, like he's the guy, and the Giants are going to win, whatever. And of course, I was working then, and the whole city went because it was in the city, and you could hear the noise and the fireworks and all that other stuff when they won, right? Anyways, a week later or something like that, he's doing his work. And all of a sudden, he brings me the deal. I was helping out do the paperwork because he was buying his Vespa, getting it. He wanted to ship it up to Seattle, and the parts guy is like giving me the information. I'm like, this guy has no idea who this is. This is Tim, whatever his name is. And he gives me the driver's license, give me the paperwork, right? And all of a sudden, I'm like, you have no idea who this guy is. And anyways, he does all the paperwork, does everything. And they had like this little see-through little wall that I can look into the parts area where he was. But because it's a bike, it's shipped and they're going to ship it up to Seattle and all that. So more if it wasn't like in a showroom. But anyways, he had no idea who it was. And he's taking care of this guy. Well, he's going in the back, do the paperwork. He walks into the corner of the showroom looking at the cars that we had. And girls walking down the street recognize him, come in and say, hey, can I take your picture? I take my picture with you? And he's like, sure. So this guy doesn't see it either. And then all of a sudden he leaves and I'm like, hey, I'm like, do you know who that was? He goes, yeah, Tim, whatever, he gives the name. I said, you don't know who that is. Reached over, had the newspaper, whatever, that was still the World Series thing that he had at the counter. I'm like, you don't recognize him? Oh, man. Like, no way. That was him and I didn't even know it? Like, and like sometimes it's like people don't realize who they're seeing. Right? I just thought that was, that was funny that, and there's always different things that you run across, but it was like one that, sometimes you see different people and, people just don't realize sometimes, they're blind to the fact because they're focused in their job. And he was just like, okay, yeah, I'm selling a bike. I mean, it's great. I got to purchase that or whatever, and he's like,
Yeah, he
subconscious to whatever's going on
zoned out.
and zoned out. He didn't realize what it was. And it was, it's funny. And it's like, especially when you can tell him, you know who this was? You know,
You know,
how about you?
it's so funny that it remind me to the one time that I met Queen Latifah. She came in with somebody else, and I saw her walking in back when I was selling cars, and I walked up to her and I said, "Welcome. My name is Frank. What's your name?" And she looked at me like for a minute, like she looked at me like you don't know me. She said, "I'm Queen Latifah." I said, "Of course I know your name." And then we had a really cool conversations, and she bought a car, and I delivered it to her house, and she gave me a ride back to the dealership. And the funny part was she had an S class, and she had this driver, I guess slash bodyguard. I think I don't know because he drove really crazy. So I felt like we were driving like a getaway car, and she was so cool. She sat in the front next to the driver, and she asked me to sit in the back when they were giving me a ride back to the dealership. So that was a great experience. So this reminded me of that. Okay, so this is the last one. Okay, from firefighting to car sales, and now being general manager of a dealership. What's one key life lessons you learned?
Well, definitely from being on the fire department, life's short. You got to live each day to the fullest. Doesn't have to be crazy, but you never know when that last minute is, right? We all see it on the news. We see everything, and again, live each day to the fullest. If you don't enjoy what you're doing, you don't enjoy the job you go get up every morning and do, change it. Life is short. Life flies by, I mean, everybody
So true.
right now, it's already May, and we're already in 2024. Before we know it, it's going to be half over with, right? People don't realize how fast time flies, right? Or how things change, and everything is within your control to some extent, but you got to enjoy the time now, right? And give it the commitment, but also you got to know where your balances are as well, right? Sometimes we learn that too late in life, because again, from being a firefighter, volunteer on a paid on-call department to a full-time department, working 24 on, 48 off. On my off days, I worked at a dealership downtown Chicago, right? My kids were younger. All I was doing was working, doing all the focus. And you can have regrets in life because you look back and say, man, all that time I didn't have and didn't enjoy the time, right? You thought you're providing for them, but when you're working and you're not there for them, it makes a difference in life, right? And then it's too late because then now they're grown up. And then now with 6 grandkids, now it's like payback time. Now it's like, okay, now I want to try to balance out the time with the grandkids to make up for the time that you missed in life that comes and goes way too fast, right? And luckily, different people going back to, seeing people, die in your arms when they're, newborns to 4-year-old, to 14-year-olds speaking their last words to you as a fire department, and us knowing as old as we are, or as old as everybody listening to this is, if you're older than any of those ages, you're still further along in the life, right? And things are never as bad as you think it is, which is the other thing, right? From all the, the people that contemplate suicide and things like that, and obviously seeing the bad side of that over times, life is never that bad, right? There's always something, just change it. Wake up the next day and make a difference in life, because that's where it's all up to you. And if your environment's too bad, right, just pick up and leave and go somewhere else, right? There's still plenty of places in the U.S. that you can walk to, run to, drive to, fly to, and just go start your life over again if it's really that bad. But to end it, why? There's, you can start over again and become something. And all of these famous people, going back to Grant Cardone real quick, you listen to his life story and where, he had his downfalls, and now he's, super wealthy. You listen to all the other different people and where they started out, Steve Jobs, and you look at the house that they grew up in and where they were at and what they grew up to and all the different people. So anybody can do it. And there's a lot of people that didn't make their money until after they were 50, 60 years old and they started a business and went and made all their money. So there's always time in life to make a change, and that's probably the biggest thing that I've learned over the years. Obviously seeing it firsthand, it hits you more on the fire department, but everybody else has different personal relations, that they've experienced it in their life. And it's just taking that reality and knowing that it makes a difference.
100%. I totally agree. People, I feel like, and I try not to do this because I'm sure we are guilty of this, but I try not to do it. And I think a lot of people take it for granted. They think like they have so much time, like they will never get old. Then they will have infinite time, and it's not how it works.
Right.
And I totally agree with you. Well, thank you for that.
And one last thing I added, because, the other thing is keeping a balance, right? Because you can be busy and you can work hard and all that, but make sure you always take out some time for yourself, whether it's,
Yes.
within your reason of taking trips, with or without family. But sometimes you just need your time to just decompress and balance out. Again, if things get to be too much, but you got to have that balance. You can't just work nonstop, 24/7 in essence, and just stay focused on it and not take any alone time, or family time. It's just a matter of, again, reconnecting and knowing what your visions of how you want to see yourself down the road.
100%. I hope a lot of people are listening to this right now will try to think of their time a little differently.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because life is short, as you said.
Exactly. Best word of advice. And be confident, make the change, and go for it, right? Because it's within grasp. If you believe in you can do it, you can do it. You just have to believe in yourself. It's just a matter of how long it's going to take, but you can make it happen,
Yeah. Again, I have to say again, one more time, I agree with you because I feel like a life without taking risks, it's not, what are you doing if you don't take risks?
Right.
If you're not trying something hard, if you're not trying to reach a goal, if you're not trying to be better, what's the point? Like you have to try it. But I'd like to thank you. This is a great message because this is something that I'm dealing with myself, and I've been dealing with it for many years now, trying to be better, do better for myself, for people around me. And it's just not easy, but it's so funny because even though you try something, even though if it's not going to work out the way you want it, at the end, you still, that feeling you have for trying, giving it 100%, because I always say you rather live with certain failures than regrets.
Correct.
Because regrets, man, I'm telling you. I'm telling you, this episode turned out to be a long one, but it's definitely a fun one. So I'd like to thank you. No. We definitely have to get together because I feel like there's so much we still want to talk about from business and everything else. Yeah. So I'd like to thank you for being here. Once again, I'd like to say thank you to our sponsor. You could check them out at www.vannuysmaserati.com. And again, if you're interested in any of their cars, please contact me or Mark. Doesn't matter which one. I still direct you to Mark. And definitely check him out. And we will have a special for you guys, which I will have in the description area whenever it's ready. We just did this very fast, so we didn't have time to put it together yet. But you definitely get the $500 discount on any car you want, used, new, even though if it's on sale already. So once again, thank you for being here.
Thanks,
and make sure everybody, of course, and make sure everybody, if they... Can people find you on social media? Do you have like social media?
Nothing direct. Obviously through the delership channels. And
how about LinkedIn?
Yeah, LinkedIn.
You do have LinkedIn? Okay.
I only got about 30,000 people, but
okay. So he only has about 30,000. What are you trying to reach?
Which isn't nothing from they don't pay anything on there. So
he's trying to
reach influencer.
At least 100,000 people. So I highly recommend following him and also follow me. And if you found this any interesting and you found it helpful, you got something out of it, please go ahead and like and please review this podcast and share your thoughts with us. We'd love to hear back from you.
Yeah, or topics that next time we meet, you want us to touch base on or expound on, let us know.
I absolutely love that. You definitely do that as well. Thank you guys, listeners. And Mark, I love you, brother. Thanks you so much.
Appreciate it.